Live. It's Neil Atkinson from what we can call the rainy city of Liverpool. Joining us is Mike Bankole from London. Is it raining in London, Mike?
It's not actually. It's still chilly, but like no rain
I'm
so
not
far.
surprised, honestly. All the rain has come to Liverpool. I've got Ste Evans. We can observe all the rain. And from God's own peninsula, we've got Ali McGovern in order to work through building up to Liverpool versus Brighton. And from there as well, look back at what's been the international break, the way in which it's gone. We're going to discuss the manager's press conference from earlier today, where he got stuck into the obvious stuff around Trent Alexander-Arnold. But he also made mention of the fact that Liverpool, from now until November the 12th, will be playing 13 games in 43 or 42 days, depending on which day you pick as day one. It doesn't really matter. The principle is Liverpool will be playing a game every 3.25 days over that period of time. And there was a report this week from a company called Howden that I got sent to me about year-on-year comparison of injuries from the Big Five leagues last season. Now, obviously, it was skewed by COVID and especially the Omicron variant. But within that, it was crystal clear that injuries across the Big Five leagues are increasing. And the manager speaks about this an awful lot. Steve made brief mention of it today in the press conference. But for me, the knock-on effects of this are really rather great for a number of different reasons. Obviously, we've seen Liverpool have an injury issue so far this season. But for me, I just think the demands now on top-level footballers are absolutely enormous. The manager talks about it whenever he can. And this is a good opportunity to do so, looking ahead to 13 games in 42 days.
Yeah, it's relentless now, is it? The schedule that these players have to put through, especially the teams playing in Europe, the Champions League and the Conference League and Europa League. These playing every 3 or 4 days, and even more so this season, but build up to the World Cup really. So, this is why the teams want bigger, fatter squads really, with good players stacked on the bench as well. The 5 subs things has come in now, which I think will help a little towards sort of relieving that sort of fatigue that the players are going to feel. But even the teams that aren't in Europe are going to feel the pressure now, playing that every 2-3 days now, because you've got the League Cup as well to get in before to go finish for the World Cup, and then so that's going to be a lot of pressure for the teams that haven't got the bigger squads really as well. So it's going to be tough, and there's no coincidence that you've seen on the back of that a lot more muscle injuries, a lot more. If you look at our schedule last season, we played every game possible, and the knock-on effect from that has probably been that we had a lot more muscle injuries leading up in the early part of this season as well. So yeah, it's a tough one to manage for the coaching team.
In the thing that Howden had pulled together, Mike, there was like this thing that was like the graph of hamstring injuries and how they'd increased. And especially in the Premier League, I was like, my God, that is a lot of hamstrings that have gone here over the course of last season. And last season was in and of itself really rather hectic, especially for Liverpool, but not solely for Liverpool. I think whenever there's a lot of chat on and off about football reform for a variety of reasons, occasionally because somebody simply asks Gary Neville, occasionally because Todd Bowley goes for a walk. But one of the things that never seems to come into chat about football reform is quite literally the players and the impact that all of this has on the players. And it's the players that we love. It's the players that we get excited about. It's the players who bring the game. And for me, the players just get forgotten about too easily.
Yeah, and look, I'm going to back our manager here because he's someone that's spoken consistently about the players. And people have viewed this through Liverpool prism, right? So if you like Jurgen Klopp's trying to protect Liverpool's interest. But I actually think beyond that, Jurgen Klopp's sort of a manager that plays mind games. I just think he genuinely has like a deep compassion for footballers. He admires footballers from other clubs. You hear him speak about footballers from other clubs. And I think he just wants us to be in a place where we're looking after these footballers who, we pay to watch so much money. And these are the people who kind of drive the products, if you like. And for me, it's not even just injuries that's a concern for me. It's the other things around that. So I actually read like a FIFPro report about how, frequent match exposure is going to lead to things like sleep deprivation for some of these footballers, travel fatigue. That can't be ideal. And, people talk, okay, these footballers are paid loads of money, they should be able to deal with it. But no, they aren't machines. They are human beings. Contrary to the extraordinary things they can do on a football pitch, they are human beings who need looking after. So I think it's really important that football organisations are taking into consideration players' welfare, because there's only so long this can go on for. There was a compelling case to kind of take into account player welfare before you kind of shoehorn the World Cup into the winter. I think that case is even more compelling now. And what's going to end up happening is a lot of big clubs are going to end up just hoovering up loads of talent, creating a huge gap between them and the rest of the leagues. And that's not what we want. We don't want this huge disparity between the top end of the league and the bottom end of the league. And that's what's going to happen, I fear.
I feel as though, Alison, that is the structural place where this ends up, which is that the richer clubs effectively stockpile the talent. If you think about Liverpool, as an example, but you don't have to just use Liverpool. Chelsea, to me, look like they've got sort of 22, 23 really good professionals. And the idea is that we want to see the best footballers play all the time. You know, Manchester City use a slimmer squad, but in years to come, if this continues, they may choose to hoover up all the talent. There's reports today about what 2024, 2025 could look like, even more games again within there. And I just think that the sheer way in which football is structured, as Mike says, the end product will end up with lots and lots of footballers not playing, but being available in an emergency for one of the Champions League clubs.
So much of the way that football is structured is basically like reverse redistribution. And without like getting really boring really quickly, there is like some structural problems here. There's like a significant market failure that means that all of the incentives are in the wrong place. At the human level, you know, I agree. I think you sort of feel slightly sorry for the footballers sometimes, that training to be able to play at the level at which they play must be an incredible responsibility. Then, you know, there's the kind of all of the other aspects of fitness. Then there's the kind of mental health and well-being. Then there's their role in the community and so on. And at the heart of it is this like unrelenting calendar that, because we want to see the best footballers play and because, you know, we all want to win so much, all of the incentives, I think, go in the wrong direction at the moment. I think football needs much stronger guide rails around it, around welfare, but also around sort of equal sharing to kind of underpin the competition. But as I say, having, as a veteran of the Crouch review process, I'll resist the temptation to go into detail on that one. But we've got to have much more stronger principles, because otherwise we will end up with the teams at the top just having huge squads that they don't always use but just want to have on hand, and other teams inevitably always losing out.
As Alison mentions training there, Steve, you know, we know our manager and arguably, well, not arguably, the other great manager in this league, Pep Guardiola, they both absolutely love training. They adore training. They see training as the point. And when Klopp's spoken in the past about player fatigue and about what we're asking the players to do, one of the things he's always come back to is, if you want to see the best players produce the best stuff, you need to let us rest them a bit more, and you need to let us work with them a bit more. And to me, that, you know, if you want to really sort of shift the language, rather than talk as a supporter, to talk as a consumer. You know, if I want to see the best possible football, and the best possible football is displaying the best possible football, then they need looking after, but they also need to be given time to develop. We don't expect Olympic athletes to peak for 10 months of the year. They get to peak at the Olympics, whereas footballers, the expectation is they must be constantly peaking. Liverpool play Brighton, as Arsenal and Man City, with other games in between in the next 3 weekends, and we need Liverpool to peak for all 3 of those games. And that is, you know, that is such a demand. And I think that the manager thinks, you know, give me more time with them and let's see what they can really do.
Yeah, and that's the drum has been banging for a long time, and I think you'll see a lot more managers banging that same drum over the next few weeks, because they'll feel the effects of it as well. But as you say, all they're getting is a diluted product when you run them into the ground week after week, or three times a week. And then expecting to see, you know, complaining when games are a bit tight and cagey 0-0, because these lads haven't got the energy to be you know, exert themselves to 100% every game. You know, it's a thing that not only the Premier League but the FA have got to look at as well. I mean, look at the end of last season, they had Liverpool played every single game possible, and then they had 3 weeks of internationals, which was just absolutely ludicrous. Of the lads running around playing these 4 or 5 international games, it seemed to go on for forever, really. And then they had 3 or 4 weeks off, and they're back in pre-season training again. So it's no wonder you see a knock-on effect of high injuries, as you mentioned before, and a diluted product as a consequence of running these lads into the ground. So something's got to give somewhere. You know, they're talking. See, what we said they don't need is fucking all-star games and things like that, which is what's getting banded about, because, you know, it should be going the other way. We should be looking at less football, less football for the better product.
The last part on it, Mike, is it's how hard it's been, how inexorable the idea of reform, certainly positive reform, positive change always seems to be in football. The manager had to bang the drum for 5 subs for what felt like years, you know what I mean? It almost got dull listening to talk about 5 subs. He gets the 5 subs eventually. The interesting Klopp thing at times is that it feels as though he bangs on about everything for ages, says I'm giving up on that now, and 3 months later it happens. That's what happened with the 5 subs thing. But you just think sort of in generally, he, Guardiola, Arteta, I think have all said people have got to get around the table and talk about the calendar. It just doesn't seem to happen. And every single reform, whenever anything changes, to me, it always feels as though it's more likely to get worse rather than better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think loads of the reforms you've seen in recent years are going to make football a lot worse. I mean, the Champions League reformatting of that's going to be an absolute disaster. And I'm a bit annoyed about that, just because we saw this big furore about the Super League, and look again, the Super League was abhorrent in so many ways, both in terms of the context of it and also in terms of the elitism. But there should be as much uproar about the kind of reformation of the Champions League that's going to happen in a few years' time. So I don't understand why, not us, but it's kind of people who were making lots of noise back then, I'm thinking about Gary Neville here, aren't making that much noise about Champions League kind of changes now. And I just think that one of the big hindrances when it comes to change in football is football tribalism. And often I think a lot of what Klopp says is viewed through this he's trying to do it for Liverpool's benefit thing. He's trying to play mind games here. But actually, no, I just think we want the best. We want the best for the sport. Some of these managers want the best for the sport, and it's important that we just kind of get around the table and get around the table with that understanding. It's not about trying to benefit my club or trying to do what's best for my people. Yeah, sure. Listen, of course, Liverpool are going to benefit if there are less games and Klopp has more time to train. Of course, that's going to be a benefit for us. But this is actually about the bigger picture, and I think it's important that we kind of put these rivalries to the side. As beautiful as they are, I love the football tribalism, but I hate the football tribalism that impedes us from making positive progress in football.
Ali, the idea, the manager, himself, and he said, and as I say, I think Guardiola has about, they quite like their voice to be heard. The other thing that occurs to me amongst all of this is the players themselves, the people who create the thing, their voices aren't heard in the decision-making chambers either. And there's no current mechanism to bring that about. But to me, the players have, in a number of different ways, certainly in this country, and I would say in further afield, have shown an astonishing level of maturity across the last 3 or 4 seasons. And ultimately, I think their voice should be heard. It should be heard at a decision-making level. And I think we're going to get closer and closer to that point across the next couple of years, where I think eventually something is going to give, where the players are going to, not dissimilar to in US sports, the players are absolutely going to demand that their voice is heard at the highest level.
That's right, because in the end, they are the ones who are on the pitch week in, week out, who have to deal with myriad consequences. I would just go back to the point about the money, though, because the reason why people want to, pack the calendar is because that's what drives the revenue, and we've got to have a much more sensible way of making the money move around the sport to protect that competition. You've got to have a proper structure around football that means that the games that are played perpetuate that good sense of competition over the league. And by that, I mean, making sure that we don't have these, it's already been said, the idea of having the World Cup in this way at this time where it's going to be was criticised quite a lot, quite rightly, for this very reason. But here we are kind of still living with it. So I think that we could start in the UK by putting some principles back into football, or into football if they were ever there in the first place, to make sure that the money moves down the league well. That means everybody should be able to be financially sustainable, to afford decent players, and to win or lose based on the basis of football competition, not on the basis of who can amass the most players to deal with the situation of blocking the calendar. I would also say that, I think as women's football grows more and more, that is going to become part of the conversation, and there's going to be a balance about what audiences want to see. It's felt for quite some time that, when you're watching women's football, often it feels like the women's football calendar is kind of...
They don't play enough, ironically.
The men's game, and I don't think that's sustainable. So I think we'll get into a sensible conversation about, where clubs want to see more kind of balanced audience for their women and men's teams, how that perhaps makes more sensible use at the time.
Indeed. Okay, the manager's press conference then, to work through it. He was inevitably going to be asked about Trent Alexander-Arnold first and foremost, Ste. Given Gareth Southgate's comments, he was hugely diplomatic, whilst making very, very clear where his loyalties lie. Not unexpected that it would be with the player in this instance, and made crystal clear that he'd pick the player for any team in any scenario, whilst allowing the idea that the England manager gets to choose. The England manager does get to choose. I'm surprised. The one thing I think we've seen so far from Southgate is an astonishing amount of diplomacy. I'm actually surprised Southgate was as deeply undiplomatic as he was around Trent Alexander-Arnold, and actually arguably put Jurgen Klopp in a position where I think Klopp let him off the hook.
Yeah, a little bit. I was just surprised at some of the comments that the Southgate made. There's some things that probably don't need to be in the public domain, and fair enough, you back your own decisions and back yourself in your decisions of picking what team you see as fit. But I thought some of his comments were maybe a touch too far, really. I think not only does he make himself look a bit stupid, but he kind of sets him up for the fall, really, if he goes to the World Cup and he isn't successful, which looking at the recent performances wouldn't suggest they're going to be. But certainly, hanging all your sort of you're fishing you're putting all the eggs in one basket, so to speak. But with regards to these fullbacks, the three that he seems to pick are exactly the same and no difference in them whatsoever. It just makes himself look a bit stupid, I think. I'm surprised Jurgen, he kind of looked Jurgen when he's asked the question to say, listen, I can give you a rocket in, you can have some headlines, but you know what they're going to be anyway. So I'm surprised Jurgen bit his tongue as much as he did as well, really. I thought, as you said, that definitely let him off the hook, because I thought he could have roasted him a little bit there. So, Southgate's made his bed. I'm sure he'll have to line that now. Whether he's right or wrong, time will tell. But for me, I think he's talking nonsense.
Ali, it's obviously the England manager is in a position where he's got four very good right backs. We'll be protective around Trent Alexander-Arnold. We're right to be. But the thing that sort of strikes me is that you get very few genuinely unique talents in footballers. All the footballers that we get to watch in the Premier League, full stop, are unbelievably talented, unbelievably physically and technically gifted. But then there's certain footballers who are just the next level above that. And, Trent Alexander-Arnold is one of them. And to me, when you've got sort of a talent that mercurial, I'm surprised the England manager chooses to dismiss that level of mercurial talent cheaply. That's not to say that he has to pick him. He can pick who he wants, but to generate the potential headlines that he could generate with that, to be divisive, is something that, as I say, you've just not really seen from Southgate so far. I was surprised by it.
Yeah, I mean, I as has been said, I thought Klopp handled it brilliantly. Just basically to point out that we can all make headlines and controversy if we want, but does that actually help the team win? And in the end, it doesn't help either team, actually. And of course, managers are going to back themselves. Of course they are. They've got to take big decisions. I think, we talked a lot about the Liverpool team and about not just the players, but the connections between the players. And I have absolutely no idea what Southgate, what his choice might represent, but I think there's things you can't always see that aren't based on individual talent, that are based on systems. They're based on combinations of players. It might be nothing to do with Trent. So we have no idea of this stuff, and I think you're right, Neil. We're always going to back our squad, and once they've got that red shirt on, they're one of ours, right? But what will help Liverpool players do well, I think, is like dealing with some of these issues. I think actually it must be incredibly hard for footballers across different teams to balance out their national team responsibilities, where they get very little time to train and then are all the time constantly, no doubt, thinking about what's going on back at home and the issues that they're going to face when they get back.
It's with him, and sort of to bring it round to the De Zerbi conversation, Mike, because I thought the way in which he talked about De Zerbi was fascinating, both in terms of being a coach and manager in a second language, having to adapt, whether or not that's difficult, whether or not that's easy. I think adaptation is part of this, and it's part of the Trent Alexander-Arnold sort of conversation. To get the best out of Trent Alexander-Arnold, the team needs to adapt to him to a quite significant extent. They've got to know what it is that he's so special at, and that's where, as I say, I've got sympathy with what Ali says, but that's why, for instance, it frustrates me when our manager's got to be the diplomatic one in a situation created by theirs, and the idea of people being able to adapt to one another. It's the Brighton side we're going to come up against at the weekend. As the manager said, is he getting old in inverted commas? Brighton, is he getting new in inverted commas? Brighton, he's got no sense of that at that point, because what Brighton actually had was a system where it was very much about getting the best out of their individual players. That is the trick of football. And it's why, as I say, I've got some sympathy with Southgate up until the point at which he publicly criticises the player. And it's why I think this game coming at the weekend will be absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, on Trent, I do think picking Trent is a commitment to a particular style of football. there's been so much talk about Trent redefining what it is to be a fullback, and in some ways he has, but also he's an incredibly unique footballer. I don't think I've ever seen a fullback with the passing range off both feet that Trent does. Like, he passes as well as Steven Gerrard in my view.
And accuracy as well.
Yeah, accuracy, pace, the power of his part. He's just a phenomenal creative player, essentially. And we've not seen a right back like that before. So I can understand why Southgate might find it a bit tricky to integrate the player, but the way in which he's dug him out a few times has been in poor taste. And Southgate's someone who's praised a lot for his man management. And look, at times he has been really good, and he's kind of changed the culture around the England national team. But I don't get what you gain by digging out an extremely talented young footballer on the eve of, like, or just before a big tournament. You can make it clear it's not your plans, but do so in a very diplomatic way. And I don't think that's been achieved by Southgate. On Brighton, I'm intrigued because I feel like Brighton have been in a good place this season. But it feels like a good time to play them, in that they have a new manager, but like there's some level of unpredictability there that means that there's a sense that they're there for the taking almost. And not like we're going to go there and batter them 7-0 or something, but they're like, there's an opportunity there for Liverpool to actually, get a good result there against Brighton, because I think Potter and his methods will be institutionalised at the club. So there is this muscle memory of what it was to play against Liverpool under Graham Potter. But they do have a new manager. They do have a slightly different approach now. And it remains to be seen what it's going to look like until we play them on Saturday.
Other things from the press conference, he talked about time to adapt, Steve, which I think was interesting. He was pushed on the World Cup interruption a little bit, which was, it was a funny one, because he went, well, I don't know, mate, which, is always when you tell he's on quite good form, I think. But on the idea of the time to adapt for a new manager, he seemed to me, to be quite, what's the word for it, really? I think he's, I think he first and foremost is always determined to say, well, football's football. But I think he'll remember from his own period of his own sort of coming in October, the way in which he did, and the way in which performances that he was getting, never mind results, but performances he was getting would oscillate wildly. Manchester City away and Chelsea away on the one hand, Watford away on the other hand. Those games come within a 2-month period, and he had managed to have both variants on it. And I think that's something that he is conscious of. So he never wants to overstate his case.
No, it's probably new managers aren't always afforded time when they first come into managing the Premier League. So I think it's important that the Brighton lads stick with it. And as previously said, they've been really good this season. Really impressed every time I've seen them. So I can't see them trying to change too much. As we've said, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it. Really, they'll have obviously similar coaches there who were there for the whole time, who can sort of help them sort of make sure they carry out the same sort of tactics that they've had that's seen them get some great results already this season. So it'll take time. It always takes time to implement new strategies, new tactics to any sort of football team, really. And as long as the results aren't horrendous, usually they'll be given a good 2, 3, 4 months. You can't really afford to lose 3 or 4 on the bounce, but it will be dead interesting to see how they set up on Saturday, because as I said, they've been really impressive so far this season. So I'm not too sure they'll try and change too much too soon.
And the other thing he was asked about, Ali, was Eurovision.
Eurovision?
Yeah, he got asked about Eurovision towards the end of it. He got asked about Eurovision. He had no idea. It was a glorious set of circumstances. And then he said to the.
You know what? I missed that bit, because I must have got to the 20-something minute of it, and then I was second to
last question. He got Eurovision.
You got asked about Eurovision,
about whether or not Eurovision being in Liverpool would be a good thing. Did you see it, Mike? I loved his. You didn't get that far either.
What did he say?
He didn't really know what was going on, and he asked the fella when would it be, and the journalist didn't know when it was going to be, and he said, "Well, you've not come to this very well prepared."
He's in good form today.
Will it affect our playing schedule?
Well, he was on the verge of asking that, I think. But what he said was, he realised, well, it'll be a party, and so we should have it in Liverpool. He warmed to the idea, Steve, didn't he, at first? And he said he used to watch it to Dortmund.
He said he used to watch it on Friday nights before games on a Friday or Saturday night, and he said he was always pissed off because Germany never won. He said, "You got no chance with the UK then, mate. We never win anything." Nil point, mate. Nil point.
Yeah, he says we always get nothing from Austria, which was a lovely little bit of Jurgen Klopp bitterness. Listen, it was an excellent press conference. Do take your time to do it. I mentioned the thing at the start was from something called Howden Group. You can see the report that's on there. It's 130 pages long. I have glossed over them, so you don't have to. But basically, footballers are getting run into the ground and injured more often is the thing to take from it. This is the Anfield Wrap. It is TAW Live. If you listen to this as a podcast, we are going to have a little break in a second or two for a couple of inserts. Earlier this week, I was part of, well, I turned up to, more accurately, a Hillsborough Law event as part of the Labour Party Conference Fringe. It was had in Nova Scotia, supported by Avenue HQ, and everyone who spoke was marvellous. We put it out as a free podcast a couple of days ago, well, yesterday I think it was, but my current perception of time is weak, to say the least. From there, listen if you can. Don't feel as though you have to. It's not an obligation, and do choose the moment when you listen, because some of it is very, very moving and very draining indeed. But it was an excellent event, and thanks to everyone who spoke. You can listen to that on the Anfield Wrap. But coming up now, if you are listening to this as a podcast, we've got Brian and Simon from the Soda Jerker podcast, speaking to John Gibbons, the wonderful Soda Jerker podcast. And then after that, Sean Clement, who is running the London Marathon on behalf of Comfort Angels. He is speaking to Josh Sexton. All of that, if you're listening to this as a podcast, is available. But if you are joining us on TAW Live as a live product, in 3, 2, 1, we're back. We are back. I've got Ali McGovern. Well done, Andy. He's put it in the private chat there, 25-21. For those of you who pay attention to this, we've got Ste Evans and we've got Mike Bankole to talk about Liverpool versus Brighton. And then what comes next? Because for me, Mike, I think Saturday's bench will be, after the press conference, I'm not quite as convinced in terms of what might happen in the front three, but I think Saturday's bench may well be Gomez, Milner, Henderson, Bačević, Firmino, Nunez, Artur and Carvalho. Konate is relatively close. The manager suggested towards the end Robertson was closer. Jones, Chamberlain, and theoretically Keita a little further along. Ramsey a question mark in time for a variety of ways. But the point is, the 8 outfield players I just mentioned there on the bench, Mike, I'd be quite happy to see any of them play some part in Saturday's game, dependent on game scenario. And I think that's the first time this season Liverpool have been able to say that about a bench.
Yeah, and it feels good because the Ajax game was really encouraging, the last game we had before the break. And now we're in a position where it's like a perfect storm of players are starting to play well for their international teams, and also before the break against Ajax. We have players coming back from injury, and there's a real chance to build momentum. And look, we've spoken earlier about how it's a busy schedule. It's going to be really important over this period to manage legs, also manage minds. You know, these players are going to be mentally drained with a number of games coming so thick and fast, and that's going to require a lot of their mental focus. So I think there's a delicate balance in that tier between kind of building momentum and getting some results, because we need to win games. We need to start getting some points on the board and climbing the table, but then also just making sure that everyone's okay, because what we don't want is to have some more severe injuries. We have to look after the likes of Thiago, after the likes of Jordan Henderson. A lot of our midfielders need a lot of looking after, is what I would say.
Tending to like a good garden.
Yeah. We need to look after those boys, you know. Wrap them all in cotton wool is what I would say. But no, just to make sure that we are managing the squad well, I think is going to be really, really important for us over this next month or so.
It is, Ali. You know, Brighton currently sitting fourth. They played ever so well this season. They've obviously got the new manager. Our manager references it today, and obviously clearly rates him as a football mind, likes the football that he plays. Liverpool, you know, they play the 4th seed in their Champions League group across the next 2 midweeks. Now, there's an issue there that the 4th seed is Glasgow Rangers. So it'll be made to feel like a derby. It'll get unbelievable levels of coverage in this country, but they are the 4th seed in the group. And Liverpool in the weeks play Brighton, who currently sit 4th, then Arsenal, who currently sit 1st, then Manchester City, who currently sit 2nd. And I think for all 3 of those games, those league games, Liverpool need their best players in the best possible condition to get a result. It will take some managing from the manager.
Yeah, it certainly does. And, you know, we've had a dreadful start to the season. So those 3 games could not be more important. I think, you know, psychologically, these are probably like the most important 3 games ahead of March or whatever, you know, once you get into the run-in. So that is a big deal. It's another reason isn't great for us in terms of timing, so it's kind of no wonder Jurgen. I think that it's a difficult period as well. I think like the weather and all of that it is really pouring down here today. So I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, what we don't need tomorrow is yet more kind of mad weather. Just
the only thing is Brighton is so glorious. Brighton is so glorious, Ali.
My connection's loose. I'm going to blame the weather if you can't hear it.
I'll move over to Ste while Ali gets the connection back. The thing is, the good people of Brighton have probably never seen the likes of this sort of weather, Ste. So, that could work in our favour. But as Ali was saying there, these 3 games, they're not quite season defining, but they will have ramifications as to what sort of season we're in for the other side of the World Cup. To be honest with you, there's a realm where Liverpool take 7 points from those 3 games, no matter what order they get shared out in, and ultimately we'll be in good nick in the second half of the campaign. You would think, we'll grow from there. But it's very possible that from these 3 games, Liverpool possibly only take 4 points, at which point the world will just look like a very, very different place. And that's why the manager, I think, I'm glad he looks like he's in good form, because it makes me feel confident when he's quite ebullient. But still, it starts against Brighton, and of the 3, Brighton is the most straightforward game, and Liverpool have got to show something tomorrow.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm with you thinking, I don't think the season is over completely if we only get 4 points from the next 3 league games, but we make it very, very tough for ourselves to mount any kind of Premier League challenge, I think, from there. But I think the one thing he'll want to get tomorrow on his legs is momentum and get some rhythm in the team. And certainly, as I'm with you, I think he'll go much stronger in the league games. I'm not saying he'll go a weakened side against Rangers, but he'll want to get the 3 points in both of them games to make the qualification a little bit easier into the group stages. But he'll really want a really good start tomorrow. Really want to sort of carry on from the last home game as a game against Ajax and push on to make sure that we get 3 points. It's a must-win game for me tomorrow, as I say, to get really good rhythm and just a good mindset, really, and a feel-good factor around the squad, because there will be a bit of nerves. That they'll know that they haven't had the greatest start to the season, but they'll know that the shoots are some green shoots there from the last couple of games to show that they possibly could be getting into a bit of form. So, I think he'll go really strong tomorrow. I think he'll really want to get the 3 points on the board, and then look at they'll take each game as it comes, really, to make sure we kick on from there.
On that, Ste, when you mentioned how well they played last time out, Mike's mentioned it as well against Ajax. I actually think it's an underrated performance. It's one of those performances that, because of the way it sits contextually off the back of the, dreadful showing against Napoli and in general where the league form was, because it becomes a late winner. Liverpool very much dominated that game and deserved to win it. And if the side's riding high, everyone rates that performance higher as far as I'm concerned against Ajax. And Ajax hadn't even conceded a goal before that game. For me, I'd like to see him go unchanged if he can. I mean, he's got to assess the players' legs around how they've come back from international duty. But the team sheet I would like would be one where from Ajax, not every single player who starts that one starts this one.
Yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed if I saw the same team myself, to be honest with you. I think Jota has looked sharp in that game, though he tired towards the end and he scored a goal, obviously an international as well, and played well there. Núñez has obviously been away with Uruguay. Diaz has been away with Colombia, so I'm not too sure how they'll be fatigue-wise with all the travelling, and I'm not too sure how many minutes they play while they're away. But yeah, I'm with you. I thought we were very good against Ajax. I thought we never really got a bounce of a ball for the whole game until the last couple of minutes when we managed to get the winner. But I thought we more than deserved to win that game, and some of our play was really good. So I wouldn't be against seeing a very similar side. Maybe Henderson. You might look at Henderson thinking he may start with Henderson and go to Harvey if he managed to get a couple of goals ahead. But that would be the only sort of question mark for me. I think apart from that, I'd be more than happy going the same side.
It's one where, Ali, as said before about the pressure on it, the manager in the press conference said, we don't know what they're going to do. We don't even know how they're going to do set pieces. So we've just got to worry about us. And I think that suits Liverpool right now. I think, we've obviously got a game on the horizon, arguably 2 league games on the horizon, where we're going to have to worry to an extent about the opposition in Arsenal and Manchester City. But I think on Saturday, being able to have complete clarity of thought, and that's one thing that the manager's always good at, clarity of thought. Saturday, we just need to think about us. And if we do us right, we'll hopefully get a result. We cannot hear Alison. I can't hear Alison. And she was on a delay to start with, and nobody else can either. We'll have to edit this bit, Andy. 33:21, marvellous stuff. And I'll go over then back to Mike on a similar sort of point. The manager wanted the clarity of thought. I think we just worry about us. We can't worry about them. We worry about us. And that's what I think we're going to see tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think for us, it's just about worrying about our game and trying to look more and more like Liverpool. So I think against Ajax, we saw some promising signs of what we are as a side. The set pieces were good. The front three were connected and played with each other and kind of linked up with each other well. And that's what we need to do. We need to just try and keep building that. And like I said, this period now is about building momentum because we need to get results on the board. And I like the manager was in good form. He had this like bullishness about him, I thought, in the press conference today, and I feel like we're going to have our tails up. And look, we have a lot to prove. I think not just like as a collective, but played within our squad, like, you know, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Mo Salah, who's not had like the best 2022. All of us have like a lot to prove between now and the World Cup, and it is important we just get on a good run. Worry about ourselves, and obviously we have those 2 big games against Arsenal and Man City coming up, where we definitely have to worry about Man City and Arsenal. They both are quite good sides. But for now, it's Brighton on Saturday. We have no idea what to expect. They could be amazing. They could be rubbish now. Who knows? But should be a good test for us. And I'm feeling pretty confident we're going to win that game and win it quite well and build some momentum.
Are you, Mike, with me in terms of what you want to see with his selection? As I say, I don't want to see anything. I'd hold back on Henderson just because he only had a couple of minutes. Use him off the bench and then maybe look to integrate him against Rangers. Maybe rest Fabinho for that one, or Thiago for that one, or Elliot. You know what I mean? I think because he does want to get them all fit over a period of time. For me, I genuinely would love to see an unchanged side. I think he mentioned about flights, you know, players being delayed on flights and having quite arduous international breaks. But if he could do it, I'd love to see the same lineup. Yeah,
I would love to see the same lineup too. I think those players deserve the ability to build on that performance and to show us again what we saw against Ajax. Because again, I thought, like you, it was an underrated performance. It's one of those games where if it ends 3 or 4-1, that wouldn't flatter us at all. I think if anything, 2-1 flattered Ajax. You know, I feel like it's one of those games where we could have scored from every single set piece. Like I feel like Van Dijk and Matip had 2 or 3 good chances each in that game, on top of the other chances we created in the game. So yeah, I would go game with those players. I also think, like you said, we have to treat Brighton with every bit of respect. We don't know what to expect from them, but you know, I would treat it as we're playing Graham Potter's Brighton, who are 4th in the table. You know, they are a team who are good, and I think the team we put out against Ajax was probably our best team on paper at the moment, based on where players aren't in the form and fitness. So go with that same 11. Go with that same 11 that showed us what Liverpool are more like, and let's get the win. That's my mentality, I think.
All right. Give us a prediction then, Mike. You said before you expect Liverpool to show something.
I think 3-0. I'm going to go for Luis Diaz brace and Trent Alexander-Arnold goal and a celebration in honour of Southgate, hopefully.
How would he do that? I'm trying to think for a second. Is there a way you can mime a Southgate?
It would be something like a shush or shush. One of those things.
Okay.
Yeah, classic.
I mean, the shush is so multi-purpose.
You can't go wrong with a shush.
Steve, what have you got for us? What do you reckon?
Yeah. I mean, I'm expecting a good performance. I think they'll be chomping at the bit now to come back and build on the Ajax win, which seems like so long ago now. So it's I'm expecting the lads to come back and be firing all cylinders. I expect us to get the win. I'm going to say 3-1.
Okay, we've lost Alison. The signal across the Mersey has not returned. Listen, our office looks out onto the Mersey. It's very, very choppy. I'm going to presume that all Wirral Wi-Fi is hardwired in under the river, and therefore is all packed up as far as we're concerned. It's been a pleasure. It's been produced by Andy Heaton. It is Ste Evans. It is Mike Bankole. Thank you very much to Alison as well and everyone else who's contributed to the show. It is absolutely fantastic that we have Premier League football back. It's been so long since that Merseyside derby. It's mad to think that is the last Premier League game that Liverpool have played. We said this in the past, you've got to cherish every last minute of it. I don't care what the weather's doing tomorrow. I can't wait to be in Anfield. Liverpool versus Brighton. I fancy the Reds. See you later.